Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. It's so wonderful to be here with you tonight to talk about the stages of the path to enlightenment, those stages that lead us to exactly what we want, the thing that we search for every single day of our lives, happiness at its highest level, and a freedom from suffering we never seem to be able to achieve. And here we are tonight learning specific graduated stages that allow us to transform our minds into minds that only have happiness and never have to suffer again. So we're really fortunate to all be here tonight to hear this teaching that Buddha Shakyamuni passed down to us in 2,600 years ago out of great compassion. He appeared in this world to show us exactly what we need to do in order to achieve the state that he had already achieved, this state of perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect wisdom, perfect power, perfect skillful means, and a complete freedom from suffering. And these qualities would be qualities that would never, ever end. These qualities would be qualities of a mind that would always possess these qualities. And Buddha Shakyamuni was so kind to come here to show us how to get exactly what we want and how to get rid of everything that we don't want. And these stages of the path are flawless. They are all of Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings put into a succinct order, into graduated stages that allow us to not only progress along the path, but to use them as mirrors to know whether we are doing so or not. So Lord Atisha came in the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment and showed us how all of Lord Buddha's teachings could be divided into three different categories and called them the teachings for beings of three capacities, and said, understand that there are persons of three capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to identify their individual characteristics. And Lord Atisha was so kind to be able to take all of Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings and all of these great commentaries and bodhisattvas' points that they made about these teachings and put them into a format that would allow us to practice in a way that would give us the prerequisites for the latter realizations. And this is so important because if we just look at the sutras, or if we just look at some of the authentic Indian commentaries in the Nalanda tradition, it can be very hard for us to know exactly where to begin. And out of Tisha's great kindness, showing up in Tibet to clarify some things, he showed us in specific stages how to progress along the path that only leads to complete Buddhahood, and showed us within each of the scopes how to achieve specific results that would be dependent upon practices found within each of those scopes, and then came to express that those scopes were necessary for the latter scopes, and they would be in common with the latter scopes. So we know that we have to practice all of these things and realize all of these things within the Lam Rim and the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity in the perfection vehicle and in the resultant vehicle if we want to achieve the complete final Buddhahood. And that, why would we want to achieve complete final Buddhahood? It just sounds like some word, some special term. And that place, that state of Buddhahood, not place, that state of Buddhahood is a state where one has completely woken up, no longer has the afflictive obstructions that bind us to cyclic existence or the obstructions to omniscience that keep us from being the most reliable, blissful guides in the universe. They no longer have those. So we will eventually learn how to remove those obstacles and become the Buddha. Just become a Buddha, just like Buddha Shakyamuni did, in dependence upon realizing the stages of the path that Buddha Shakyamuni realized to achieve his goal. And all the Buddhas, the previous Buddhas, the countless previous Buddhas that came before Buddha Shakyamuni, all realized the non-abiding nirvana in dependence upon these same stages of the path to enlightenment, the teaching shared in common with beings of small, medium, and great capacity. So knowing that this is the kind of teaching that we're going to be going over tonight, we're going to be going over something that includes everything that we need to know. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, to get to the final step right before becoming a Buddha on the 10th Bodhisattva ground, that final moment, that right before becoming a Buddha, we'll know how to get to that place and then what we'll need to do at that final moment in order to have a complete realization of relativity and diversity that comes from the resultant ground of Buddhahood, from removing the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So this is the kind of teaching that we're giving this evening. So this is a teaching that will show any being in whatever level of spiritual realization that they are, if they aren't Buddhas, exactly what they'll need to do, whether it's just explicitly being taught or implicitly within it because they're sharper than us. They will be able to, this teaching will include everything for everyone at whatever spiritual level they are at. So therefore, because this is a Mahayana teaching, we should set our motivation in the proper way. Set a kind motivation, set a loving and caring motivation, set a motivation that will actually get us to a place that's like the one I just explained, a Buddhahood where we're free from all the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, where we have perfect love, compassion, skillful means, power, and a perfect wisdom, and just this perfect caring for others. We'll be able to achieve independence upon these stages. So because, like I said, this is a Mahayana teaching, we want to lay tracks within our mind that will allow us to achieve the results that we're talking about. And in order to achieve the results that we're talking about, this complete state of reliable bliss, in order to achieve that state, we have to realize certain things on the way there. And one of the things that we have to realize is bodhicitta on the way there. And in order to realize bodhicitta, we have to realize renunciation, and renunciation in terms of the real renunciation, and renunciation in respect to the lower realms of cyclic existence. So we have all of these things that we have to realize that serve as prerequisites for our realization of this great mind. And some of the other things that will cause it to occur are habitual tendencies that we're creating now that are like those of the mind that we want to create. So we want to create a mind that's the most reliable guide in the universe. We want to create a mind that's able to simultaneously help all sentient beings in the universe. We want to create a mind that's able to speak in a language that all sentient beings are able to understand, and a scope where all sentient beings are able to be helped. We want to be able to achieve these results. We want to be able to achieve that resultant state. So all results are dependent upon concordant causes. So we're creating concordant causes. We're creating conditions within our mind that will allow for the arisal of this beautiful mind of bodhicitta, which will allow for the arisal of Buddhahood. Because without the entrance to the Mahayana bodhicitta, Buddhahood isn't possible. So we will first have to get to become bodhisattvas. And the way we become bodhisattvas is by laying tracks within our mind and creating the various mental bases that are necessary for its arisal. So this exercise that we're doing right now is an exercise to leave imprints, to leave tracks within our mind that are concordant with the results that we want. So now, because a Buddha only comes into the world, the Buddha's only point and purpose is to help sentient beings, moving from bliss to bliss to bliss, and help to help to help to help. Because the Buddha's only attitude is to do that in order to be of utmost benefit, we then imagine that we're doing something similar. So now we'll imagine that we bring all sentient beings here to be our guests, to share this gift of the Dharma with them, to share this thing, this information, which is the most important information anyone can ever hear, because all anyone wants is freedom from suffering and the highest amount of happiness possible. And usually, no one hears how to actually get it. So this is the most important thing that anybody can hear in the universe. And with that being said, imagine that you invite all sentient beings here, all the hell beings, all the hungry ghost beings, all the animal beings, all humans, all demigods and gods, and see your mind's natural reaction when you start to think about the varieties of sentient beings and how eager you are to bring those sentient beings that you care about so much, that you consider your friends and loved ones, how eager you are to bring them to a place where they can learn about being free from suffering, where they can learn about how to experience the most happiness possible. And you know that so many of those loved ones that you have around you have no clue where to even begin. They haven't heard about the Four Noble Truths. They haven't heard about self-grasping ignorance. They haven't heard about any of these things, or aren't open to hearing about any of these things that you're so eager to share. You're so eager to share with people that you care about. You're so eager to tell them about this truth, and they're not usually receptive to it. Think about your natural reaction as you move on to strangers is to be a little bit less intense and a little less eagerness to share. You feel so eager to share this truth with your loved ones, but less eager to share with strangers. And look at your mind's reaction and the bias that's created within it as you do this exercise. And then think about people who you find difficult. And think about your mind's natural reaction and inclination to have them come here and hear about the truth, hear about how to have happiness and how to be free from suffering. Watch how your mind reacts to those that you find distasteful on the television, or of a different political party than you are, or of a person in history who you thought was really, really a bad, bad being, and beings like those kind of beings. What's your natural tendency? Is it to have a non-biased attitude to equally want to benefit all of them? Or is there a kind of a push and a pull and a neutrality that's created amongst friends, neutrals, and enemies? Are you feeling this kind of push away from this inclination to help the enemies and a kind of a pull towards helping beings that you consider as close loved ones? And are you feeling kind of a less of a push or a pull, kind of a more neutral sense, just to when you kind of saw a bird go by, or you see someone in the supermarket that you don't feel like you're really know or connected to, you barely even notice as they walked by. Notice your mind's bias, because it's that bias that will keep you from being Buddha. It's that bias that will keep you from having great compassion. Great compassion, as we're going to learn about tonight, is important in the beginning and middle and end. And if you have this bias, you can't have great compassion, because great compassion has its object of observation, every single sentient being in the universe, and a wish for them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So these exercises you do are gauges to see whether or not you're moving closer and closer to a mind that could get great compassion, could get this kind of love through the force of attraction, or not. And as years go by, if you don't notice a difference in your experience, if there aren't, if there are still the same kind of walls up to you helping those that you find kind of difficult, then the equanimity practice, the practice of equal importance that you find in the Lojong and the 7-point cause and effect training from to getting the mind that aspires to enlightenment, there's something lacking there. So we're just using this as a gauge, just as a way to practice, to know whether or not our renunciation, bodhicitta, correct view of emptiness, are any of these things having an effect of our mind? Are we doing the practices in a way that are correct in terms of the stages? So the mirror of the Dharma is always there for us to look into, to be honest with ourselves, so we don't deceive ourselves, so that we don't feel that we're having realizations that we're not having. Now imagine that you bring the demigods here, demigods who are full of jealousy. Maybe we can't think of what a demigod would be, but just think about somebody who has a lot more happiness than you do, but's jealous all the time. I'm sure you can think of people who are like that, who on paper should be so happy, but they're just so full of jealousy. Well, the demigods on paper should be just so happy, but they're so full of jealousy. So we can think of these beings that we can't see and think of the tendencies and qualities that we have or have seen and just amplify them. And we can then think of a being that could be like a demigod or a god, somebody who's just oblivious because they have so much stuff, doesn't even think anything's really wrong, but has another thing coming when it comes to the final. You can think of people in your lives like this who seem to have everything, but as soon as sickness starts to kick in and aging starts to kick in and Botox and plastic therapy starts to kick in and people start to feel less and less like they are who they feel they should be, you see this take place. So we have to really be aware of what is our reality and isn't our reality. So we can then see if we're finding happiness externally in things that can never make us happy, or if we're developing our minds internally in a way that will always make us happy. So this is the kind of thing that we're trying to look at. Are we trying to face our reality, or are we trying to create like a God's realm and until we have to have this final facing, and then we'll have lost all of this time we could have used in facing reality and trying to actually manifest solutions within our own minds instead of chasing after things externally. So the God's realm, they have all of this happiness and bliss that they're just seeking after all of the time, and they're missing the point, and they're just wasting so much time that goes by to have an end, just like our end, dying, and have an end that definitely goes to a lower realm. And then the beings in that, not in that desire God realm, in the form and formless realm gods. Think about all these different types of being and know that if they are still in cyclic existence, they will necessarily be forced into another set of among the 4 or 5 aggregates beyond their control without a choice because of contaminated karma's afflictions and their corresponding seeds driven by self-grasping ignorance. Anyone in cyclic existence is going to have among the 3 types of suffering: the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, and pervasive compounded suffering. And recognizing this truth by understanding what those things are because you've studied, you can see that beings, no matter where they are in the 6 realms of cyclic existence, no matter how beautiful they are, no matter how good their meditative concentration is, they still have among those 3 types of suffering because they will be forced into another birth beyond their control. And it will hurt. And it won't be fancy and wonderful. So the more we can then condition ourselves to having a way of life and a mind that tallies with reality instead of trying to create worlds that are fantastic that aren't true, the closer we are to our inner essence that is this natural purity that's free from the defilements because they're adventitious. So that being said, you invited all beings here. All beings have the same potential to become a Buddha. Everyone has a mind that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied with stains that are adventitious. Everybody's mind is just clear and knowing and just could know omniscience if it was created, if this state of mind was produced in dependence upon the causes that were necessary for it to occur, this state of mind can be created. So every single sentient being that we've called here has the potential to become a Buddha. All of them have the proliferating Buddha nature and the natural Buddha nature, which is the emptiness of the proliferating Buddha nature. So because there's an emptiness of proliferating Buddha nature, because there's an emptiness of the sullied mind, it means that they can proliferate and mature into something that's pure because it isn't stuck or fixed into an inherent position. So let's invite all sentient beings here. In the language of gods, nagas, and yakshas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Laike dan lu dan no jin ke drubon da dan mi ke nan dan dro wa kunji dranan jitsampa tanche ke du da gi chu ten do. So that now we've invited all sentient beings to be our guest. Now imagine the entire merit field in the space in front of you. So we want to let all sentient beings experience the invitation of the merit field. Let all sentient beings invite along with us these holy beings, these enlightened beings, to be able to be our witness to this practice, to be able to establish the refuge field, our field of protection, to be able to look into the eyes of those beings who have so much love and compassion for us and have all the answers that we need. And we're trying to connect our minds to those kinds of beings, connect our minds over and over and over again to beings that actually can teach us how to mature our mind, that can actually teach us how to realize the truth of suchness, how to discover what the Buddha discovered, because they can't give us their realizations, but they can only guide us in a way to our own discovery of what we naturally possess, this mind that's empty of inherent existence. We just don't know it. So with that being said, imagine that these holy beings begin to start to come into the space in front of you. Buddha Shakyamuni, the space in front of you, imagining His Holiness the Dalai Lama, imagining Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, imagining Khenser Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, Demolocho Rinpoche, all of these holy beings, these enlightened masters in the space in front of you, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, imagining Jeffrey Hopkins Rinpoche, Gen Nenden Jambil Drapala, right there in the space in front of you. Imagining Umzula Geshe Aga Rinpoche and imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche. Any being that you consider a holy enlightened master, think of them in the space in front of you. Kempo Palden Sherab Rinpoche, Kempo Tsewan Donyo Rinpoche, all of these holy beings. Anyone you've been connected to or had just the blessing to know, any of those lamas, think of them. They've come to do one thing, and that's show you how to be free from suffering and how to have the most happiness possible. And they have a recipe that's 100% will always taste delicious. Imagine the beings from the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya, to masters like Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha and Master Drontompa, imagining right there in the space in front of you, passing down this lineage of the extensive deeds and teaching us how to understand grounds and paths, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, this beautiful lineage of instruction of Vinaya and so forth. We're so blessed to be able to have these teachings in our lives, this lineage in our lives, this spiritual family of ours in our lives. If we consider ourselves students of Lama Tsongkhapa and we study the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the Lamrim Chemo, then we're blessed to have all of these beings in our lives, because Atisha was able to gather all of these lineages together and pass them down, and they land right in our laps because of the kindness of our lamas. Now imagining the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Manjushri, to Arya Nagarjuna and masters like Buddha Palita and Arya Deva and Chandrakirti and Shanti Deva and Baba Vega and Jnana Garba and Chandarashita and Kamala Shila. And again, imagining Lama Salimpa, imagining Lord Atisha and Lord Drontompa, all right there in the space in front of you, passing down this profound view lineage, the lineage of instruction that's completely necessary if we want the liberating path. If we want to understand what the object of negation is, if we want to understand what it is we need to realize in order to free ourselves from cyclic existence and become a Buddha, we have to understand the emptiness that's taught in the profound view lineage, and anything short of that emptiness, anything short of the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena will not get us to enlightenment. And any yogic direct perception of anything other than the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena is not seeing emptiness directly and is not the path of seeing. So we can only, through relying upon this view of emptiness, this is the only view of emptiness that will allow us to realize what we need to realize to start to abandon the acquired afflictions, the philosophically acquired afflictions, and the innate afflictions. It's only that view coupled with the method. If we want to become a Buddha, we need both the method of renunciation and bodhicitta, found in both of these lineages. Bodhicitta, the 7-point cause and effect found for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, found in the extensive deeds lineage, and the equalizing exchange in self with others practice found in the profound view lineage, both bodhicitta practices. So these lineages are so important to us. The lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara to Saraha, masters like Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Lotsawa Marpa, Jetsun Milarepa, Jagan Popa. Imagine Drontompa passing down the holy Lamrim lineage, the Lamrim tradition that we teach, we talk about, Rinpoche talked about for 25 years. This only happened because a lay, Upisaka, a lay person holding the lay person's vows, passed down the Lamrim lineage, and it turned into 3 old Kadampa traditions. Think about that. Think about how important this spiritual family is. Holy beings of the Nyingma tradition, Padmasambhava, Longchenpa, Mipam, all of these holy beings, the holy beings of the Sakya tradition, Sakya Kunganipo, Sakya Pandita, Sakya Randawa, Lama Tsongkhapa's teacher. Holy beings of the Kagyu tradition, Je Gampo, all the Karmapas. The holy beings of the Galupa tradition, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtupje, Jelsupje, Basu Chuji Jetson, Penchen Sonandrapa, Jayan Sheba, Gonchu Jimmy Wambo, Gonchu Jimmy Wambo, Janja Ripi Dorje, Jetsumba, Purbajo, 7th Dalai Lama, 1st Dalai Lama, 3rd Dalai Lama, 7th Dalai Lama, 5th Dalai Lama, all of these holy beings that we're so blessed to have the teachings of in our lives, are the Panchen Lamas. So fortunate to have all of these Lamrim commentaries that we can look at, all of these volumes of commentaries. It will tell us exactly what we need to know to change our own minds, to have happiness within, how to be free from suffering. how to lessen these disturbed, worried states of mind more and more and more to the point where we just only feel bliss and never suffer again. Imagine the beings of the highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, Action Tantra, all the 35 Buddhas, all the protector deities, right there in the space in front of you. Imagine that you and all sentient beings are witnessing this thing you've just never, ever seen before. All of these holy beings in one place. I don't know if any of you have ever been in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and just felt that immense amount of love, especially as he gets closer and closer and closer to you. You almost feel like your body stops working and you just start crying. And there's just, it's because this being is so holy, because you're now in the presence of Chenrezig Buddha. You don't know what it's like to be in the presence of Chenrezig Buddha, and you get into the presence of a holy being like this, and it just makes you stop to function in a normal way because their presence is so holy. Now you imagine we have the whole entire merit field in the space in front of you. Just imagine that your mind is full of that kind of bliss that you've had maybe in respect to being close to maybe like a lama like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche or Ganden Tri Rinpoche, or any of these holy lamas you've been in close to. You know that feeling. Imagine if that feeling was amplified by all of the holy beings in the universe, all of those enlightened beings of the extensive deeds, profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings, and all of those holy beings in the various classes of Tantra and protectors and 35 Buddhas. Imagine what it would feel like if they were all right here and they were here just in your presence. Imagine that sentient beings, you and all sentient beings, are experiencing this incredible blessing right now. Just being in a room with so much love, being in a room with so much purity. No one has any motive except a motive to help you, to love you, to care about you, to love you into a place where you can care about yourself enough to understand why everything is screwed up all of the time. Really rejoice in this moment that you have. And with that being said, now imagine that you and all sentient beings who are witnessing this incredible event now begin to see the merit field change slightly and turn into Vulture Peak Mountain, where the second turning of the wheel of Dharma occurred. We know the first turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Four Noble Truths occurred in Varanasi. And we know that the second turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Heart Sutra occurred at Rajgriha at Vulture Peak Mountain. And then the third turning of the wheel of Dharma occurred in Vaishali. So the second turning of the wheel of Dharma occurred at Vulture Peak Mountain. Imagine now that you and all sentient beings are there at Vulture Peak Mountain together with Buddha Shakyamuni, who's blessing Shariputra and Chenrezig, and this play as it's going on. Imagine that these beings are actually speaking these words as you see in the format of the Heart Sutra, as you hear kind of the cast of characters that's being presented. Imagine that those cast of characters are the ones who are actually responding, and you're hearing these responses. And you're not only hearing the words, but hopefully you've meditated on this Heart Sutra before, or maybe you haven't. Maybe this is the first time you hear it. But what can happen is once first you have to kind of get used to the words, then you get used to the words, and then the meaning you can kind of think about as you're thinking of Shariputra and Chenrezig having this dialogue. You're thinking about this meaning kind of in rapid time. And then once you kind of get what this thing means and you get deeper and deeper into it, then you can have experience in rapid time in relation to this Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, is the definitive teaching. It's the teaching where the Buddha comes to tell us that things appear one way, and the way that they appear does not tally with reality. And it's in dependence upon this misapprehension of things that causes us to have all of our problems. And when we think of what could this possibly mean? What does this mean about the way things appear to us? Because it's not something we would normally think about. It's not something we've ever kind of addressed until we've gotten to some sort of philosophy. But when we get to philosophy, the great masters like the fifth Dalai Lama and other, great, highly realized beings have said that the first thing we have to do is kind of identify within our own mind what the object of negation is. What is this naturally occurring, a naturally appearing thing that is causing us problems, because the Buddha says there's something that's kind of appearing to us. There's something that's going on in terms of our apprehension of things that's incorrect, that's causing us all kinds of trouble. So all the masters say that we should see. We can think about the naturally appearing I. How do I appear when we calm our minds down enough? Do I appear as though I'm kind of coming from my mind, or do I appear as if I'm something that exists right here, concretely, separately? But then when I say it appears kind of separately, this kind of idea of this I, then I start to feel like my aggregates and my hands and stuff, and then that all becomes the I. So when I look at this, the way that things naturally appear to me, they appear in some kind of concrete way that really doesn't seem to make sense to me, because it starts to not, before I investigate it, even from a natural appearance perspective, it starts to not make sense, because I get myself calm enough and I just think of Jeff. But then as soon as there's even kind of a second thought, then, or if there's a feeling in my finger, then Jeff suddenly is over here too. So is the Jeff here? Is something separate? So I have to see if I can find this thing that's naturally appearing to be so solid. When I look at a chair that's over there, it naturally appears to me to be completely solid. It appears that I'm a recorder. It appears that I'm just recording inherently existent. I'm recording concrete things that are all around me. It feels like that. It feels like I'm a recorder. It doesn't feel like I'm a projector that's recording. Does it feel like the chair is existing over there from its own side as something that's right over there with all kinds of qualities and all that stuff that's over there? Or does it feel like it's something that is coming from my mind? Now, not coming from my mind only in the sense that it's the same nature of my mind, meaning that my mind's acting as a projector onto a screen that's there's a distance between the mind and the screen. So it's not, the mind isn't the screen, but does the chair over there appear like it's something that I'm projecting and then believing in chair? Or does it seem like there's chair that's existing from its own side? And when I'm really honest with myself, I say that the chair seems to exist from its own side. But when I say, okay, well, where is that chair? If there's something that there is a chair that exists from its own side, it should be findable. If there's something that's an I that exists from my own side, it should be findable. So this findability, there must be a Jeff that holds himself up, able to stand on my own, a findable Jeff. There must be a chair that's able to hold itself up, a findable chair over there. And if that's the case, I should be able to subject it to some sort of analysis and find it. It shouldn't be something abstract. It shouldn't be something that is not findable. It should be something findable. And when I start to see how findable it could be, I find that it could be findable in only two ways. Something that's within the aggregates, or something that's, or parts, aggregates or parts, something that's in the parts of the chair, or something that's out of the parts of the chair. Because I'm feeling like there's something over there that's inherently findable that's chair. There's something that I'm feeling over here that's inherently findable as Jeff. So I should be able to find the Jeff or the chair within the parts or outside of the parts. So when we take a look at this investigation, we're probably going to come up short. We're going to find that this thing that appears one way, when we investigate it, its appearance doesn't tally with reality. It appears to exist from its own side, but when I move closer to the parts and I look, is the top of the seat the part, is the back of the chair the part, or the legs the chair, are the legs the chair, or the seat the chair, is the back the chair? When I start to look at the individual parts of the atoms the chair, I come up with things that don't seem to be able to be chair. So I start to try to find the chair within the parts, and I can't find chair within the parts. But then when I try to find a chair that's something outside of its parts, I don't have anything to sit on. So I have a chair that can't exist inherently within its parts because it has multiple parts. And as soon as you remove the parts, you don't have the whole. As soon as you remove the whole, you don't have the parts. So I move into the parts and I try to find it in individual parts and can't find it in individual parts. And then I try to find it as something separate from those individual parts and I can't find it. I look for Jeff inside of my hands and my consciousness, and I try to identify a Jeff that can be found specifically somewhere in a locale. And I have a non-finding of that when I come to the conclusion that Jeff can't be found within his parts. But then I look, oh, can I find a Jeff that's separate from his parts? Can I find a Jeff that's separate from his mind and body? No. So this identifiable thing that we feel objectively exists in some specific way doesn't when it comes to reality and tallying. But when we take ourselves out of that kind of deeper investigation, we see there's a chair to sit on. And we see that we label something as a chair and it serves the function of sitting. So what's happening there? It's coming subjectively into being merely through imputation from this designating consciousness. Onto it, depending on a collection that serves as a basis of designation. There's nothing intrinsically from the side of the object that can be found as this or that, separate from a designating consciousness. So this is not something we're going to realize tonight. I wanted to give you a taste of what the Buddha is talking about in this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. The Buddha is saying that the way things appear to you to inherently exist, to not depend upon your mind to come into being, the way that things to appear to be from their own side, even Jeff, isn't correct, because when you investigate it, your assumption or your just way of thinking doesn't tally with reality. So what the problem is if things in your mind have this naturally appearing inherent existence, this naturally appearing concreteness, then they become something that from their own side is desirable or awful or neutral, because you find they have a value that is attractive or unattractive because they have this concreteness from their own side. And we can even see that even in conventional terms, that we don't have to go too far to look at tastes. Not everybody thinks the same thing tastes delicious. So we already see there's subjectivity going on when I look at a pizza that I love versus somebody who hates pizza. There's already some different kind of feeling you have. Geshe Dorje Damdula says when you feel like somebody you have aversion towards, or you feel like you don't like someone, even driving by their house feels like, oh, that stupid house. Our subjectivity just flavors everything, labels everything, imputes this reality onto everything that isn't there. And unfortunately, because of these imprints, because of these predispositions that we have within our mind, things appear to our sense consciousness as having this inherent existence. So our sense consciousness is reinforcing our apprehension. So the appearance of things to our sense consciousness is reinforcing the way that we feel about them. So it takes a lot of analysis and investigation to see what these various schools, what these various tenets within the ladder of understanding of emptiness of the Vaibhashika school, the Sautrantika school, the Vajramantra school, the Madhyamaka school, what they're saying is screwed up about the way that we're seeing reality. And each of them has something to offer us to untangle our misunderstanding of reality. So I encourage you all to not try to just start at the highest view to understand the Heart Sutra. Start at to get an understanding of all the views that lead up to the understanding of this final understanding that there's nothing inherently exists. Try to figure out what things would be like if they only had a little bit of this or a little bit of that. As we get through into the tenet systems, we see the selflessness of person is kind of negated. Not the inherent existence of person, but the selflessness of person in terms of permanent unitary independent self and autonomous substantial reality. This is something that's correct. We have to look at, and this is something that we grasp at as being true that isn't true. And these are objects of negation for us. They aren't final objects of negation in terms of what we need to negate in order to realize emptiness, to realize truly realize the emptiness of the object of negation. Takes us all really tons and tons of analysis and reasons, and the reasons of the levels of dependent origination, of the results depending on causes, and wholes depending upon parts, and dependence upon a mere imputation. All of these levels we have to be able to understand. And the first three schools only posit dependent origination in relation to causes and conditions. There isn't in relation to results depending upon causes. It's not until we get to the Madhyamaka, Svatantrika, and Prasangika that we get into wholes and parts and imputation. And then Prasangika is the only place that we get to mere imputation, where we say there's nothing even conventionally from the side of the object that has inherent existence. Because in the autonomy school, the Svatantrika Madhyamaka school, there's a statement that conventionally things have inherent existence, because if they didn't, we could eat tables. They have to have some kind of conventional intrinsicality in order for us to make sense out of the world, according to the autonomy school. And the Prasangika school, that this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge is representing, the Prasangika school says, no, that's not true. Even conventionally, things don't intrinsically exist. It's merely a imputation in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. Fancy words, and these are things that we have to just personally meditate on and come to more and more conclusions about, and just never be satisfied with partial instructions. Never be satisfied until you are a Buddha, until you no longer have attachment. As the great masters say, don't be satisfied. So the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge comes to tell us what the Buddha meant. The Buddha was not kidding. The Buddha was serious. This Buddha was being definitive. When Lord Buddha came to say that all phenomena, the five skandhas, to be empty of nature, and everything else in the whole universe is empty of nature, is empty of inherent existence, both conventionally and ultimately. And even ultimate truth is conventional existence. Ultimate truth is empty of inherent existence. There's nothing in the universe that isn't empty of inherent existence. Emptiness is empty of inherent existence. So we have to come to this conclusion, but this isn't a simple conclusion to come to. We first start to realize this dependent origination of these causes and conditions, and then we can kind of move on to wholes and parts, and then discover the Prasangika, subtle Prasangika view of mere imputation and the wholes and parts and causes and conditions and so forth, being bases of a designation, or being that designating consciousness itself, depending on how we interpret those three levels. So we won't get into that. We can interpret them in terms of meeting, relying, and depending, but we see that these three things are all synonymous when we look at the Prasangika view. Okay, it's enough technical information out of me this evening, but I really want to stress that this technical information is really important. And it's not just about, hey, we got to run, get out of samsara. But like we're in a house that's on fire and just think we're going to die and death and impermanence and we got to get out. We have to think about what's going to get us out, and does what Buddha's saying make sense? And if my mind's screwed up and then I think things inherently exist, and then I think things are inherently pleasurable or inherently displeasurable, then I'm going to be attached, and those are called afflictions. I'm going to have aversion. That's an affliction. And from afflictions comes contaminated action. And from contaminated actions come samsara. So without this contaminated action, we won't have samsara. But we can't not have contaminated action without getting rid of afflictions. Because no matter what, if we have afflictions, we'll have more contaminated action. And the coarse afflictions are driven by an inappropriate attention that's driven by self-grasping ignorance. And this is also clearly laid out by great masters in Chandrakirti and Aryadeva and Nagarjuna and Shantideva. All of these great masters clearly lay this out. The ceasing of Nagarjuna's Moya Madhyamika Karika, the ceasing of karma and afflictions is nirvana. Karma and afflictions arise from conceptuality, inappropriate attention, which in turn arises from elaborations, self-grasping ignorance. Elaborations cease into emptiness. Elaborations of signs, or elaborations of self-characteristics and so forth. So all of these things cease. All of this duality ceases into emptiness. And then hidden within this Heart Sutra, besides blowing our minds with the nature of reality and telling us that everything that you think and everything you've apprehended a little bit wrong, and nothing you've apprehended has been completely right in any of the lives you've ever lived. Everything you've apprehended has been a little bit wrong, and nothing you've apprehended has been completely right since beginningless time. And that's what Buddha Shakyamuni came to tell us at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, and said that this is causing you to have all of this mess of samsara that you're in. And then within this, hidden in here, is the teaching on the 5 paths. Hidden in here, the teaching on the bodhisattva path, the ripening path. When we look at the emptiness and the mind realizing emptiness, this is a liberating path. But we also need the ripening paths. The ripening paths for a hearer, a solitary realizer, would be things like renunciation and the practices of the 3 highest higher training, the 2 of the highest higher trainings and so forth, these ripening paths that are necessary, the accumulation of merit and all the things that are necessary as ripening paths. And then liberating path would be the path of realizing emptiness. Both of these things are necessary. And then for the bodhisattva, the liberating path is the same, emptiness that's realized. More reasons are given for the Mahayanists for the emptiness of inherent existence, and they use more and more reasons to be able to later, get rid of the innate afflictions and so forth, and then eventually get rid of the obstructions to omniscience. So they have just much more broader understanding of emptiness than a hearer, solitary realizer, but their emptiness is the same object. There isn't a different emptiness that they understand. It's an emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena. So that liberating path is the same, except the Mahayanas is a liberating path is a little bit more fancy, but the object of negation is the same thing. But as far as the ripening paths go, the difference between the ripening path, one key difference, there's a lot of differences, but one key difference is that bodhicitta is involved. The desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings is a ripening path. And that ripening path pushes the being into the state of Buddhahood, like the ripening path of renunciation pushes the hearer solitary realizer, when coupled with the liberating path of the wisdom realizing emptiness into an abiding nirvana. The ripening path of bodhicitta, coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness, pushes the bodhisattva into the state of complete Buddhahood. So we need both the liberating paths and the ripening paths. The liberating path, the wisdom realizing emptiness, is presented here in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge explicitly, and then implicitly within this we find the 5 paths: the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. Teata Om Gate, path of accumulation. Gate, path of preparation. Paragate, path of seeing. Parasamgate, path of meditation. Bodhisoha, path of no more learning. So we have the learning, the resultant path of Bodhisoha, of Buddhahood, and those paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, and meditation that lead up to it, that the Bodhisattva goes through, beginning with aspiring bodhicitta, and then ending with the 10th bodhisattva ground, and then the final moment before Buddhahood, and then Bodhisoha, the path of no more learning. Okay, so the sutra, now imagine we're at Vulture Peak Mountain, Buddha Shakyamuni, Chenrezig, Shariputra, all sentient beings here, hearing exactly the truth of suchness that they need to get rid of whatever it is is the next step of abandonment for them to move closer to Buddhahood, because we know ultimately there's one vehicle that leads to Buddhahood, and everything that's needed is presented within the Lam Rim, and everything that's needed implicitly, hidden, if you will, is found within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha, Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha, monks in a great gathering of the Sangha, Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way, saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear, they transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way, Teyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Buddhi Soha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. It's really important that anyone who's listening to this knows that when it says there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, when we hear selfless, no self, we have to understand that it's speaking of in terms of no inherently existent self. When we look at it, subject these things to ultimate analysis, the only thing we're looking for is an inherent existence. We're not looking for the existence of flower when we're or the existence of I. We're looking for the inherent existence of I. The non-finding of the inherent existence of I is the ultimate truth, is the emptiness of inherent existence of the I. But that's not looking for the existence of I. It's just merely saying that the I doesn't inherently exist objectively right within the object. So then when we pull back from that ultimate analysis, we find that conventionally things do subjectively exist. So there is an I that subjectively, conventionally exists. There is a nose that conventionally exists, subjectively exists. All of these things conventionally that, we are agreed upon that conventionally exist. They just exist subjectively, according to conventions, according to the world conventions. They subjectively exist. So if you say there is no self, period, full stop, you're saying that the self doesn't exist. And the object of negation, when we look at emptiness, when we're looking at ultimate analysis, it isn't the self. It's a self that's existing in a way that's independent, that can hold itself up right within itself. That's the kind of self we're looking for. When we say no self, we don't find that kind of self. But we do when we come out of an ultimate analysis that's only looking for that kind of a self. We then have to come to terms with, what is this self then? It's a subjectively, conventionally existent self. It's a valid self. It's not invalid. And this is what's so important. When we read the Heart Sutra and we say all phenomena lack inherent existence, that doesn't invalidate their conventional subjective existence. It doesn't invalidate that. Conventional analysis, conventional valid cognition just evaluates whether it's a valid cognition in terms of world conventions. And Jeff speaking right now is a valid cognition. Jeff speaking right now doesn't exist the way that Jeff speaking right now appears to me. And it's the undoing of that misunderstanding that gets me to understand how Jeff is actually talking to you. It's not that it takes Jeff talking to you away. It just tells me how Jeff is actually talking to you, as opposed to how I think Jeff is talking to you. It takes away how that chair over there appears to me to be abiding. It takes away the misapprehension of the objective existence appearance that the chair is seeming to have from its own side. It doesn't take the chair away. It just takes my understanding of the chair and has to change it. My understanding of me has to be changed because the way that I think of myself doesn't tally with reality. Wow. Kala jube ne jo damba ne ngushe de je nga yi de de jen ju ba bo lama yi bu jin zi ne song gandro zo la sha ze lo aga samara de chandara samara ve gasamara. Aga samara de chandara samara ve de ata onga de gate baragate barazangate badizo baba gonju sanji gae dembe doji je lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji dragi baji metu bishin danji je dingo yezo ha. Yeah, the judge is well done. Me doing the bed and on. Well done. Don't bother Jim Bonson Georgie. Dashi de John then show. Excuse me. Outer mandala offering a perfect universe uh, as a request for teaching to the teacher, but to the whole entire lineage. So yes, I'm giving this talk, but I'm only giving this talk because I was requested to continue giving teachings by Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. I only can give this talk because Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche and Umsala Geshe Aga Rinpoche give me these teachings. And I only can have any clue about these things because of all the different texts and the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage that these holy lamas that I have contact with and had contact with explain. So when we make a request, when we make a mandala offering, we're not only making it to the teacher, we're making it to the whole thing that backs up to Buddha Shakyamuni. So it's important for us when we make a mandala offering to imagine we're making countless mandala offerings. Countless sentient beings are around us making mandala offerings. We've brought all sentient beings to make these countless offerings, and that the merit field is just countless Buddhas. In every atom, there's countless Buddhas, just like it says in the King of Prayers. So we're trying to create in each moment, as Gunter Dembi Drome says, we're trying to create a virtuous imprint in every single moment that we can and try to make that virtuous imprint like an atomic bomb of virtue that can do away with as much non-virtue as possible. So it's for that reason we try to make our visualizations as packed as possible. And when we make a mandala offering, we're making it as a perfect universe with perfectly happy beings, because that's all that the Buddhas want, is perfectly happy beings. They've only come here to show us how to be perfectly happy. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje jadan zaji janan la, janju badu da ni jazu ji, dagi ju she ji bezonan ji, drola benji sanje ju bajo, sanje jadan zaji janan la, janju badu da ni jazu ji, dagi ju she ji bezonan ji, drola benji sanje ju bajo, sanje jadan zaji janan la, janju badu da ni jazu ji, dagi ju she ji bezonan ji, enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma that abandons all views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. From Sache Konga Nimpos, at parting from the four attachments, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. And that's what it means in the heart. What I was just talking about, and about the Heart Sutra, and needing to get to the true object of negation, to truly understand it, to be able to have a yogic direct perception of the actual nature of reality. It has to be completely clear that there is nothing but mere imputation, independence upon a basis of designation, that independence upon a collection that serves as its basis of designation, just mere designation. And if there's grasping at anything else, conventionally or ultimately even, as possessing that kind of nature or findability, then there's grasping and you don't have the view. And if you don't have the view, you can't be enlightened, even in the sense of a solitary, like, individual liberation vehicle, the Hinayana vehicle. If there's grasping, you can't be free from cyclic existence. So it's so important to understand what the meaning of the nature of reality is, and also practice the ripening paths and accumulate merit that will allow us to be able to understand the nature of reality more and more and more. One of the key things that Lama Tsongkhapa was told by Manjushri right before he was able to realize the complete view was to accumulate merit, to see his teachers as inseparable from the Buddha, as from the deity, from the meditation deity, and to study and to purify, accumulate merit, and study the great text of the Indian Pandits. And that this is what we all need to do. If Lama Tsongkhapa needed to do that, this is what we all need to do. So we're fortunate tonight that we're learning from Lama Tsongkhapa about the stages of the path, because he was able to study the great Indian Pandits' texts, and such as Atisha and all of the extensive deeds and profound lineage holders' texts, to be able to present it even more succinctly, to spoon feed us even easier than the Nalanda Pandits did, because of the need for clarification for so many of us, like myself, that aren't able to just understand the more difficult points and where to put them. Lama Tsongkhapa was able to even clarify more and more and more, depending on what size of the Lam Rim we're speaking of, in order for someone like me to understand exactly what I need to do in order to become a Buddha. So tonight we're looking at The Source of All My Good, Foundation of All Good Qualities by Lama Tsongkhapa. That's a 14-stanza poem that encompasses everything that you need to know to go from wherever you are as a spiritual level, whatever, as a Buddhist religious practitioner. There's markings and measures you can find in the Lam Rim of where that begins. So wherever you would begin, or even if you haven't begun to be a spiritual practitioner, how you would become one. So how you would become one, or where you are, if you are one, where you would begin as a spiritual practitioner. And it then shows us in the Lam Rim where to go next, and where to go next, and eventually how to get to the completion stage of highest yoga tantra and do the final practice. So the teachings show you from all the way at the, before you even are a spiritual practitioner, how to become one, all the way to the final stage of completion of Buddhahood, contained within these 14 short stanzas. So we're fortunate that we have the teachings that go around it, because I highly doubt, unless you're super sharp, you could take these 14 stanzas and wouldn't require the greater texts. But what a beautiful thing, as you study the greater text, you can find so much more meaning in each of these stanzas. And as you study the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, which goes over the perfection vehicle and has like this much about the resultant vehicle in it, you'll understand more and more and more. And then you look at the great treatise on the tantric stage of the path to enlightenment, and you can understand the end of this more and more and more. So all of these greater texts, if you're like me, are going to be required to understand every one of these stanzas. But as weeks go by, if you continue to study, each time you read these stanzas, you'll go, oh, there's something else. I promise you that that will happen. And there'll be a great joy in that finding. It won't be dull. So the source of all my good, foundation of all good qualities, can be divided into 4 categories, Pabunka Rinpoche says. First category is how to find a Lama. Second category is what you do after finding a Lama. Third category is the request to attain all the favorable conditions for succeeding in the path, and to stop any kind of circumstances that would prevent you from not succeeding. And then the final category of a prayer that all your future lives you're taken care of by a Lama, and that you're able to succeed in all the stages of the levels and pass and reach the state of Vajradhara. So those are the 4 categories Pabunka Rinpoche says, and I'll just kind of fill them in as we go. And I'm not going to give commentary because we're now at the great scope, and I just want to talk. I want to start there for the most part. So the first category, Pabunka Rinpoche says, is the very root of the path: how to take on a Lama, serve, etc. And we find the qualities of the Lama in the great treatise and all these points made. Source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. So we see this in the Lam Rim as a preliminary, as a foundation practice right before we even get to the small scope. So we know that, though, this is in common with all the different levels, small, medium, and great scope, because you need a teacher, which is the foundation of all good qualities, all the way up to the resultant stages. You see that you have this idea of these practices of highest yoga tantra always rely upon the teacher. So you see the importance that this teacher theme carries through all of the different scopes, but it's a preliminary in the Lam Rim, because death and impermanence is where we actually start the small scope teachings. The next category is what to do once you've found a Lama, and it talks about the life of leisure and life of leisure specifically here. The Lam Rim Chemo talks about leisure and opportunity, 8 leisures and 10 opportunities. We can look into that at another time or go back in the teachings I've given on it previously. And we know it's so hard to find because the causes are hard to get. The examples show you how hard it is. And the numbers make it very, very hard to actually have this position that we're in right now. We need these stainless prayers. We need ethics. We need the practice of the other 5 perfections and so forth. We need so much in order to make this human basis occur that it's incredible that we have it. And it's incredible that it's so valuable. And we don't think about its value. We think about just using it like animals to get what we want, to get some more food, to get some more sex, to get some more stuff, to get a thing to drive us around in. We think about using it for that. We think that's its value. But its value really is something that would allow us to be satisfied forever, to never worry again, to never have to worry about, oh, how do I look? What will they think? What will happen? What will happen if I do this? And I'm always worrying and so forth. We have this valuable basis from which we can learn how to be satisfied forever. We can learn through the teachings for beings of 3 capacities exactly how to get what we want, as opposed to running around like idiots, basically, acting like animals, trying to find, like an animal can just go after a bone, as it says in the Lam Rim, but it takes intelligence to find out how to be satisfied out forever. We really have to think about what's separating us. We can think about whether our apprehension of objects tallies with reality or not. The animal's just going to go after that inherently existent thing, that appears inherently existent thing to them, that they just put so much value on, and themselves they put so much value on, and the anger, then the fear and everything that's created. So it's really important for us to look at the value that we have, and separate ourselves from animals and do something with this human basis, with this mind that has the potential to be able to do these incredible things in a state of bliss and help everyone in the universe. That's the kind of value it has and should be used for, Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. Let's do something with this human basis that we have, because now we get into the actual small scope teaching. Because my life, body, and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave, bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. So this concludes the part on the small scope, or the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. And we find this is how we go about getting out of the lower realms of cyclic existence. We would day and night engage in the practices of the small scope if we were a small scope practitioner. That would allow us, we would think day and night about being free from the lower realms of cyclic existence, and we would behave accordingly. So we think we're these high Mahayana practitioners, but do we even have a small scope realization? We have to look in the mirror of the Dharma and stop deceiving ourselves if we don't, and start creating the causes for a mind that day and nights wants to get out of the lower realms and engages in the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtues and goes for refuge to the 3 jewels and acknowledges our downfalls. These are the things that we should be doing and focusing on if we're going to have a value in our life at the smallest level. And then we realize at the next level that even the higher realms of cyclic existence that we're part of, when we investigate them thoroughly, are plagued with suffering, plagued with at least the suffering, pervasive compounded suffering, if it's the super high realms. And then the ones that we're experiencing, the realms we're experiencing, we have to engage in the suffering, the suffering of change, and this pervasive compounded suffering. So we see that, and we're in a higher realm right now, and this is dissatisfying. So when we start to investigate the various types of suffering, the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, the 3 types of suffering, as found in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, we look at the 12 links of dependent origination, we look at the 4 Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, origin, cessation, and path, and then we start to get a more realistic way of thinking that tells us that we want to day and night get out of cyclic existence. And that's the marker if we've realized this teaching, if we day and night want to seek transcendent liberation, if we want to be free from suffering, we want to get out of states of hardship, hard states. We want to get out of those states. And if day and night we're thinking of getting out of all of cyclic existence, then we're practicing those 3 highest higher trainings. Then this is kind of a marker if we have this kind of attitude day and night. This is a high attitude to have. So now, in dependence upon recognizing my own current state, recognizing that I have 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings. I have the suffering of right now, aging. I have the suffering of sickness right now. I will die, definitely. I'm a human being. Human beings die. I've looked around. I've seen enough of that happen. That will happen. I separate from the pleasant. I've separated from my teacher's form, my physical body left, someone who cared about me more than anyone in the universe, and I cared about them more than anyone in the universe, like that I ever knew, like this feeling that I had. I had to separate from that pleasantness, and I had to meet with the unpleasant things, and I don't get what I want, and I have this suffering body, and I have this suffering kind of mind. I have all of this stuff that I can conclude is true. I can conclude is my current state. I do not have certainty when I start to meditate upon previous lives and future lives about anything. I think I have these concrete relationships in my life, and they could change into the exact opposite. Loving relationships can change into hatred. And I can't imagine hating the person I love so much right now. And that uncertainty is disgusting. That uncertainty is cyclic existence. That is uncertainty is what we day and night want out of, having to take rebirth again and again and shuck these bodies off and go to the high and go to the low, just doing this over and over again in a state of complete dissatisfaction, even getting what we want and being dissatisfied, not having anyone to accompany us as we're going from life to life to life. We die and then we're ejected out of this body, and we have loved ones around us, and that's it. Friends become nothing. Enemies become nothing. I, Jeff, become nothing. And now I think I'm someone else. Wow, that's scary. If you think about that, if you think and start to believe in that reality, that's scary. So it's independence upon thinking about that, and dependence upon thinking about the 3 sufferings, the suffering of suffering, those kind of coarse suffering, suffering of headaches and sadnesses you have, and then the suffering of change, the happiness that is contaminated that we think is good, and it's bait that keeps us in cyclic existence. And then this pervasive compounded suffering that keeps thrusting us life after life into another set of contaminated aggregates among 4 or 5, because we haven't gotten rid of self-grasping ignorance. We will just turn like buckets on a water wheel, like Chandrakirti talks about in the Madhyamaka Avatara, just turning over and over from high to low, just like a Ferris wheel. What goes up must come down, high to low, just circling in cyclic existence. Even if we're at the peak of cyclic existence, we're going to be thrust out of it. And that lack of freedom is suffering. So this is the mind that sets you up to then say, I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. What is this suffering life? It's samsara. What is samsara? 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and at least pervasive compounded suffering among the 3 sufferings. That's what samsara is. And there's no way out of any of that until you're out of samsara, until you're the Buddha standing outside, or you're an arhat standing outside of the wheel of life. Until you're that being, you still have among the different types of suffering. You may not have them all, depending on what special spot you're in cyclic existence, but you have some of them, so you will be thrust out of that position, and it will turn into something that is not what you're looking for. So since you've slipped and fallen into a sea of suffering life, now we start to turn this idea and look around and say, bless me to see that every single living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into, and grant me to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. So here we're talking about, bless me to be able to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. So here we realize this in the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, this idea that all sentient beings have been our mothers. So this lineage that was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya and Master Asanga, where we find the 7, and then trickles down through Lord Atisha, gets to us through Lama Tsongkhapa, Khensa Geshe Wanda Rinpoche, and all the holy lamas who teach us this 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So we recognize that all sentient beings are our mother. We've merely forgotten. We have this continuum that has beginningless births, and in those births, we've had different sentient beings as our mother, as our loved one, as those beings who took care of us when we were most vulnerable. It doesn't have to be mother. It can be whoever you can come up with as an image of someone who's taking care of you and would love you and takes care of you when you're vulnerable. That kind of being, every single being in the universe has been that kind of being to you. So you recognize that all sentient beings have had this status. And then you start to develop kind of a wish that doesn't come out of nowhere. And that's why I said we have to see if we have this pre-step. So when we look at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, there's a pre-step called equanimity. And this is what I've been harping on for the last couple of classes. Do we have this non-biased attitude, an idea that we would want to equally benefit others? Because this is where we have to start from. And then we say all sentient beings are our mother, and remember their kindness, wish to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion. We have to have this non-biased attitude if we're going to get to a place where we would say that, oh, I have every single sentient being in the universe as an object of my compassion, where I want them to all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So before... Here we're talking about bodhicitta. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment. This is the section on aspiring bodhicitta. And in order to get aspiring bodhicitta, you have to have all of these causes and conditions in your mind and have renunciation and so forth. You have to have realized the medium scope, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, because you have to realize what it is that sentient beings are going through. You have to first realize what you're going through, and then you turn towards others, realize what they're going through, and then your renunciation turns towards them and becomes compassion towards them, and has the same kind of idea of wanting them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering that you have, your wish to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So it says that compassion is important in the beginning, middle, and end. So in order to get to that state of compassion, you need that equanimity. And what we'll learn about next week is why compassion is important in the beginning, the middle, and end. And that will inspire us to engage in the practices to actually get compassion. And we'll come to find out that without compassion, you can't get bodhicitta, because bodhicitta, compassion is either a cause, when we look at compassion in the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, the steps that are before compassion are things that cause compassion, lead up to compassion, and those after it are the results of compassion. So when we look at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we have a pre-step of equanimity that's not in the 7. Then we have recognizing all sentient beings are our mothers, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction. Those are what cause compassion. And then great compassion. There's a debate about love and compassion causing each other, but let's just use that as the traditional way of explaining it. And then after compassion, you have altruism, or an extraordinary attitude, it's translated as sometimes. And then the result, which is bodhicitta. It's called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta. No more need to debate in the debate courtyard. Just learn the full name. The 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta. So if there's 7 things and there's cause and effect in there, there's got to be something in there that's a result. So we say bodhicitta, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, there's an effect there, and that's bodhicitta that comes about. And there's a big debate whether bodhicitta causes bodhicitta, because it's a main mind, and this moment's mind is caused by a previous moment's mind. And because it's a main mind, bodhicitta is caused by a previous moment's bodhicitta as a main mind. So this is how we would explain these various things, but the 7-point cause and effect has the compassion sitting kind of 3/4 of the way in, and before it are what causes the compassion, and after it is what compassion causes. So we see that this compassion is important to generate the bodhicitta, to keep the bodhisattva going in the middle, and then as the Buddha to keep helping sentient beings. So this compassion is something that we need to get right. We need to understand what it is completely, what it isn't completely, and we'll get into that next week, why it's important in the beginning, the middle, and the end, according to the great treatise in the stage of the path to enlightenment, as well as the Umagombarapsal, Chandrakirti's illuminating the intent, because Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, we see compassion is important in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And Lama Tsongkhapa comments on it, and then we find the commentary in the great treatise. And I think it's so important because when we look at the bodhicitta, the door, bodhicitta is the door entering into the Mahayana. You become a bodhisattva when you get bodhicitta. But the great scope section, when you look at it, it starts with compassion. And it starts by explaining compassion, and then it says the entrance to the Mahayana. So it shows, first goes over a summary of the stages for beings of great capacity, and then it gets into compassion and shows how compassion is the cause of, or things are a result. Compassion is caused by such and such is a result of compassion. So we'll not try to cover all of it this week. We'll get to it next week, and maybe look a little bit at Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where we see that first chapter where we find the benefits of bodhicitta. So we'll learn about why compassion is important, and then we'll find out, stay tuned, what are the benefits of bodhicitta? What is it that makes this mind so incredible? What is it that makes it that, will allow it, and only it, when coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness, to get rid of every single defilement, stain, everything wrong with our minds. So we'll learn about why that is, and we'll learn that if you don't get bodhicitta, you will not have infinite bliss, infinite reliability. You will not have in the future perfect love, compassion, skillful means, power, wisdom, perfect caring for others. You won't have those qualities perfected without bodhicitta coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness. So that's it. That's enough out of me for this evening. I hope that that was helpful. I hope you see how these paths are integrated and how you must realize the small scope and the medium scope. These aren't things like, oh, that's for children to talk about the Four Noble Truths. I like to talk about Tantrayana. Let me tell you this. You aren't practicing Tantrayana really unless you have these as the foundation. I mean, anyone can have an imagination. That imagination has to be actually a ripening, liberating path united if we're talking about Tantra. So you have to know what we're talking about if you're saying I'm a tantric practitioner. You have to know what this meaning of this entity of emptiness and the deity could mean. And the only way you're going to know what that means is if you have all of these kind of ripening paths and you have the ethics of the individual liberation and the ethics of the bodhisattva and so forth, all in place in order to remove the things needed for you to be able to be a tantric practitioner. And it says even in the Vajrapani Tantra, that you shouldn't even look at the wisdom mandala unless you have bodhicitta, if you're not a bodhisattva. So you see what the reality is if you're doing self-deception and saying I'm this great practitioner that just has to get rid of the rest of my sentient being. You could be deluding yourself and not know how to get rid of this thing you're calling a sentient being, because that thing you're calling a sentient being is mutually exclusive with a Buddha. A Buddha does not have afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. If you have afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, you're not a Buddha. You're just not. A Buddha doesn't have those things, but they can be removed because they're adventitious defilements. So once those things are removed and your mind is matured, then at that point in time, then you can say you're a Buddha. But without those things being removed, you can't say I'm a Buddha, because that a Buddha and a sentient being are mutually exclusive. A Buddha and a sentient beings among the beings who are up to the 10th Bodhisattva grounds last moment. And Buddhas are those who have transcended that and are now at the next moment into a resultant state. And you can't possibly say that a causal state is the resultant state. You can't say that. It just doesn't make any sense. You can't say that, you're making chocolate milk that's already there before you mixed it. Does that make sense? Or you can't say that you've distilled the water out of something and made it pure until it's been distilled. So anyway, but you can look at it in a lot of different ways. So that's my 2 cents for the evening. And with that being said, let's do the concluding prayers, if I can find them. I marked them really well and then lost them. Okay. We probably have, where's Rinpoche's prayer? Yeah. Oh, there it is. Great. Thank you, Lorinda. Lorinda's sitting right over here, if you heard her, giving me tips for the teaching. She's always, it's great to have a partner that cares so much about the Dharma and studies so hard and takes so many classes, and we can, share, about these things and both enhance our practice. And that's generally not the case. So I feel very fortunate. Thank you. What are I doing? I'm ending the class. Thank you, everybody. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I apologize. It's very possible. I don't have any high realizations. I'm just parakeeting a lot of this stuff and trying to share my experiences with you. So if I've made a mistake, I apologize, and may your ears and my mind and your mind be purified by this mantra of Vajrasattva. Om benzasato samaya manipulaya benzasato sena vajita didameva sudakaimeva subakaimeva anagrameva zavazimeva rajasava kamasukime kidam shian kuru ha 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 ho bhagavan sava tatakata benzamama benzabava maha samaya sapa om ve. May we always be protected by Paul Dan Lamo. Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche said is our protector. Jo Rama, Jojo Rama, Tunja Kalaracha, Moramo, Chidacha, Tunja, Rula, Rula, Hung, Jo. Don't ever be shy to say, please, Paul Dan Lamo, protect me. If you have the karma You know, she's very, very, very powerful. Samanta, I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samanta Bhaddara as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Jabel Bau Jeta Jemba Dan Kontu Zambo Deyan Dejin De Dida Gonji Jesu Daloche Kewa Dida Tanche Radu Ngo Duzun Jebe Jewa Tanje Jingo Ganla Jodu Ngabade Dishinge we tsawa de kunjan sampo chuchi ratu ngowaji. Janju zenjo rimboje maje bananje joji je banyamba me bayan gone gondu belwajo. May the supreme bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. Long ri ra we go we Shinjan de vendan de wa malu Jong we ne jen rezi wan enzin Jatso ijabe zire vadu enyoji. Prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, written by me, and also supplication to all the holy lamas, Geshe Lobsang Khenpo Rinpoche, Demolosha Rinpoche, Jeffrey Hopkins, Khenso Lobsang Gyatso, all these holy beings who've passed from our world, may they come quickly return to teach us the truth of suchness and teach us how to see emptiness as bodhisattvas. Homage to Khenso Geshe, complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness in treating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness so they know who you really are. And may you all realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness in the 2 stages as a result of hearing this teaching, analyzing this teaching, and meditating on this teaching. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you.